Thank you. So yes, this presentation will talk about different online behaviours and how this is related to vulnerability to dating app facilitated sexual violence. So for a little bit of background, in 2021, a survey was done and it said that around 3.2 million Australians were using online dating platforms. Most users were in a bit of a younger age bracket, around 25 to 34 years. And interestingly, it was the most common way of meeting a new partner, overtaking more traditional forms of meeting at uni or with friends at a bar. And I'm sure everyone here knows someone who's met their partner through a dating platform, or they themselves have met their partner. The last 3 weddings I attended, all 3 couples met through a dating platform. So they can be quite successful. However, it probably comes as no surprise as well that a lot of harms are being perpetrated on these platforms. A lot of bad things are happening. These are very easy to find news articles like this about stalking, rape, assault. And in 2021, a lot of conversation was being generated around this topic, but what was lacking was an understanding of exactly how common this issue is and the exact nature of the harms being perpetrated on these platforms. So at the AIC, what we did was a large national survey to understand the scope of the problem. We contacted Roy Morgan, who were able to facilitate that for us, who have access to large panels of potential research participants. They started in June of 2021 with a calibration survey, and this was able to let us know that 482 people of the 2,000 that they surveyed had used a dating platform in the previous 5 years. And then that was used to inform the next section of the data collection, the main section, which used proportional quota sampling. So we used quotas for Australians aged 18 plus, and we adjusted those for the age and the gender-based propensity for using a dating platform. We then removed any bad responses, which there weren't too many, which was nice, and we ended up with a sample of just under 10,000 people who had used a dating app in the last 5 years. And all of this is to say that the data is representative of dating platform users in Australia aged 18 plus. So we can see that here. We can see that the target population of dating platform users on the left were a little bit younger than the general Australian population, and this is what we would expect, knowing that dating platform users tend to be a little bit younger. We asked a whole bunch of questions about their socio-demographic characteristics, how they were using the dating platforms, these different online behaviours. And the heart of the survey was really about experiences of sexual harassment, aggression, and violence, as well as other online harm, such as being sent requests to facilitate child sexual exploitation, attempts to recruit people into exploitative conditions, and then there were some questions in there about reporting of online harms to police and to the dating platforms themselves. So what this research that I'm talking about today looks at are these 2 specific domains, so how people were using the platforms and then their experiences of sexual harassment, aggression, and violence, both online and in person. So we published the first piece of research in 2021, looking at the sexual harassment, aggression, and violence. This was just kind of a foundational piece looking at the prevalence, the scope, the nature. And more specifically for dating app facilitated sexual violence, which is the term we use to kind of encompass all of these online behaviours such as sexual violence, harassment, and aggression. We broke this down into several domains or different categories, primarily based on whether they occurred online or whether they occurred in person, perpetrated by someone that they had met on the dating platform. And this covered a whole range of different activities and behaviours, such as sexual harassment, abusive and threatening language, image-based sexual abuse, stalking, of course, sexual assault and coercion, and reproductive and sexual health-related abuse, which are things like stealthing or lying about their sexual health status. What we found in this first piece of research was that 3 in 4 respondents had experienced online dating app facilitated sexual violence, and 1 in 3 had been subjected to it in person. We also found that these experiences were not often isolated or singular, so people were experiencing multiple types of harm, they were experiencing things both online and in person, and they were experiencing the same kinds of behaviours perpetrated by multiple people. And we also found that LGB plus respondents reported the highest rates of dating app facilitated sexual violence among the subgroups that we looked at. So this next piece of research that I'll be focusing on looks at the routine online activities and how this is related to vulnerability to dating app facilitated sexual violence. So it's able to offer a little bit more context to these experiences and help explain the mechanisms for dating app facilitated sexual violence. So this is kind of based in routine activity theory, and essentially routine activity theory tries to understand crime through the lens of the perpetrator and how they make decisions when it comes to committing crimes. Essentially what it says is that for a criminal event to occur, three things have to converge in time and space. That being a motivated offender, a suitable target, and the absence of a capable guardian. And so while it uses the term suitable target, that's definitely not meant to say that some victims are more suited to victimization or anything like that. It's just more so to consider how a motivated offender might choose a target or might choose the nature of their offending. So for example, an offender might select a target that's easily accessible, that they can see, that they come into contact with on their day-to-day life, something that has little protections around it, things like this. Applied to dating app facilitated sexual violence, what we can see is that this has become quite common, in part because of minimal guardianship. So when you're meeting a stranger in real life or in the physical world, there's typically bystanders around or other types of formal security, whereas that's not necessarily as present in online spaces such as dating platforms. We also understand that online dating platforms bring together large numbers of people in this online space. So motivated offenders have a very high ability to see a lot of other users and access other users and therefore target vulnerable users as they see fit. Also, just due to the nature of online spaces, offending can be highly concealable with privacy settings, or perhaps they're using catfishing techniques, also coupled with minimal guardianship and poor reporting avenues, so offending can be quite concealable. So bringing all of these factors together, we can really understand how dating app facilitated sexual violence is so common. So in the sample, we look at dating app facilitated sexual violence kind of in two key ways. So first of all, thinking about it in aggregate or in whole. So of the sample for this piece of research, 73.4% had experienced dating app facilitated sexual violence. So that's something either online or in person. And then we also break it down by the nature of it. So looking at people who experienced it online only compared to people who had experienced it in person. And something to note is that almost everyone who experienced dating app facilitated sexual violence in person had also experienced something online. So we think there might be some key differences between people who experienced it just online compared to those who experienced it online and in person. So that's why we broke the sample down like this. So these are the online dating behaviors that we looked at. So the frequency of dating platform use, thinking about when they were using it most frequently, how many platforms they were using at once, whether they'd ever paid for a platform such as a subscription, the type of platform they were primarily using, whether it be an application or a website, and then the types of information they were sharing, whether they had linked a social media account to their dating profile, and how often they were leaving the dating platform to communicate with matches on other platforms, such as social media or messaging apps, whatever it may be. So the technical details, we did an ordered logistic regression, so predicting dating app facilitated sexual violence, whether they experienced no dating app facilitated sexual violence, online only or in person. And then from there, all the significant variables, which was all of the online dating behaviors, bar one specific piece of information they provided on their profile, all of those were significant, and we controlled for socio-demographic characteristics. And then from there, we can think about the predicted probability of experiencing dating app facilitated sexual violence depending on the different online dating behaviors. So what we can see is that for people who used more than one platform at the same time, it was predicted that 80.8% would experience dating app facilitated sexual violence. And this is compared to 73% of people who were just using one platform at once. So this is very clear why this might be associated with vulnerability. So for example, opportunity effects, if you're on multiple platforms, you're exposed to a lot more potential perpetrators. Then we have paying to use a dating platform, where again, we see that people who had a subscription or who had paid for a dating platform appeared particularly vulnerable to dating app facilitated sexual violence. And this may be because people who are paying may have a higher motivation to meet people. Maybe they're talking to more people or meeting up with more people in person, which again is an opportunity for the exposure to potential perpetrators. Or alternatively, maybe they've already experienced a harm and then they get a subscription in order to boost their safety while online dating, because a lot of the subscriptions do offer additional features, some of which can help with safety online. People who were primarily using a mobile dating app were also significantly, they had a significantly higher predicted probability of experiencing dating app facilitated sexual violence. And this may be just due to the nature of applications, which are constantly in your pocket, on your phone, you're getting notifications, so it's harder to switch off from compared to a website. And probably this is one of the bigger differences we see is if they had linked a social media account to their mobile dating platform profile, 82% were expected to have experienced dating app facilitated sexual violence compared to 73% who had not done this. And it's likely that this is the case because linking a social media then gives that perpetrator additional information about you. They can find you online in multiple places, and it gives them additional means to then contact you and harass you and stalk you and whatever else. So the next two are just different types of information included on the profile. So including interests, so information about your hobbies or whatnot, that actually decreased the probability of experiencing dating app facilitated sexual violence. And then including information about your sexual or relationship preferences increased the risk or the predicted probability. When we look at the frequency of using a dating platform, we see that people who were using them less frequently, just 74% or so, were expected to have experienced dating app facilitated sexual violence. And then we see the very clear trend of it increasing the more frequent you're using dating platforms, up to 85%. And again, this is very much opportunity effects. The more you're on there, the more exposed you are. And then we see a similar trend for how often people were communicating with their matches on other platforms, so leaving the dating platform. And this may be because other platforms don't offer the same level of protections, or perhaps the offenders moved to other platforms in order to exploit some of the vulnerabilities of other platforms, such as end-to-end encryption or different privacy settings, in order to help conceal that offending. So moving to other platforms really appeared to increase the predicted probability of any kind of dating app facilitated sexual violence. So next we look at the individuals who had experienced dating app facilitated sexual violence online only. And we don't really see much here. We can kind of see all of the bars are roughly equal lengths. In fact, it actually looks like some of these behaviors are decreasing the probability of experiencing dating app facilitated sexual violence online only. However, that's not to say that it's decreasing the risk of it online, more so that it's more pushing them towards experiencing something online as well as in person. And that's most clear when we look at the figures for in-person dating app facilitated sexual violence, where we can see some pretty dramatic differences in the predicted probabilities here. So we see that people who were using more than one platform at the same time were paying for a dating platform, primarily used a mobile dating app, those who had linked a social media account, and those who had shared information about their sexual or relationship preferences had a much higher predicted probability of experiencing something in person as well as online. And we can see the trends here for how often they were using dating platforms. So we can see as they were using them more frequently, it was more likely that they would experience something online as well as in person. And then while we see the online only kind of decreasing, again, that's not to say that the risk of experiencing something online is decreasing. It's just more that it's pushing them towards experiencing something in person as well. And the similar trend here for how often they were leaving the dating platform to communicate on other platforms. So from 31% for people who never did this, all the way up to 45% predicted probability for people who were doing that. So what's really good about routine activity theory is that we can think about situational crime prevention and how we can target each of these aspects of the crime in order to reduce the chances of it occurring. So really, you'd only need to remove the motivated offender from the equation or reduce, the perceived suitability of the target, or you can increase guardianship, and any of these can kind of reduce the risk of experiencing dating app facilitated sexual violence. So some key approaches include preventing perpetrators from exploiting these platforms, supporting users who experience harm, empowering users through information provision, and of course, promoting technological solutions. But all of this really needs to be supported by addressing the underlying issues, so the underlying causes of sexual violence more broadly, as well as technology-facilitated sexual violence, such as gender inequality or whatever else. And what's really exciting is that a lot of work is being done in this space. So when we published the first report back in 2021, it really sparked a lot of conversation, provided a good evidence base for how serious and prevalent this issue was. And from there, a lot of people got involved to help address the issue, which is great. So we brought together academics, stakeholders, non-government organizations, of course, politicians, policymakers. A whole bunch of people came together, including the dating platforms, to think about how we could solve this issue. And something that came out of it was a mandatory codes for how the industry should behave and how they should conduct themselves. And those are now in effect. And what these codes really focus on is addressing the problems. So like on the last slide, so removing bad actors from the platforms, increasing transparency so we can really understand the full scope of the problem and track if it's getting better or worse, as well as technological solutions and whatnot. And there are consequences if people don't comply with that, which is really great news. So hopeful that this issue is going to get better. So just to touch on some of the other research very briefly that has come out of this survey, because it was a really big survey. And like I touched on at the start, there were a lot of questions in there about other online harms. So we did look at dating app facilitated sexual violence among people with disability, and they were unfortunately experiencing it at very high rates. And we also look at several papers looking at the questions relating to requests to facilitate child exploitation. And we have 2 papers looking at reporting of these harms to the platforms and how this can be improved, as well as experiences of reporting to the police. And there's some forthcoming work as well looking at the questions to do with attempts to exploit people into, recruit people into exploitative conditions. And that's it from me. Thank you so much.
Thank you.